Rach, this could have been a completely different energy to this pod. This could have been disaster. This could have been tears. This could have been me, drinking a vodka and tonic this morning after a very heavy and disappointing night. But alas, it is not that podcast. It is one of celebration and jubilant and joy and hope and promise. It is everything I wanted to be sitting here in this weird little booth in my office talking about today. England 4-0. It was just everything I think that England fans needed. And before we get stuck into the game, I think a massive credit to England for overriding the storm, I think, of disappointment around that first game and, hunkering down and focusing on themselves and having that team spirit to go out and kind of put those concerns to bed. And the performance that we saw last night was assured, it was confident, it was exactly what we expect from the Lionesses. And to turn that around in such a highly pressurised situation is nothing short of absolutely iconic. So, Rach, you were obviously there. Tell me what the atmosphere was like. I literally have to live and breathe through you at the moment because I am absolutely buzzing.
Yeah, I mean, Christ, what a night and day team that was. And it's funny because we talked about what needed to change, if anything, and it was very much a case of it was less about the who and more about the actual just turning up of the players, and they absolutely did that. I was like super nervous before this game, had loads of work on, which I liked because it meant I wasn't thinking about the fact that England could go out and what that would mean for the rest of our coverage for the rest of the tournament, and how unpleasant that would be and unfun that would be to be working in that environment. So yeah, got into the stadium. Dutch fans, incredible. Did their fan march, incredible as always. Took up one end of the stadium, had their flags going, their drums. They had a big Aranyaluan sign, all spelt out. I could see them all trying to arrange the letters while we were waiting for the players to come out to make sure they'd spelt it right. The stadium very much got in the Dutch vibes because it made me realize that there's very few, or maybe they just don't know them, songs that you play before a match to G up the England fans. And I was thinking just play any song by an English artist. But no, we had Links Rechts, we had the Viva Hollandia song all playing, and I was like, this feels like we're on a home Dutch game here with all the songs coming out for the Dutch.
Was it that crowded in terms of the Netherlands contingent versus the England fans?
Not
because
even.
on the TV, it looks like a sea of orange across all four sides of the stadium.
No, it wasn't. I think that's also the colour of the chairs and stuff in the stadium. The Dutch contingency was very much at one end. We did a Dutch end and an England end, which were both kind of quite full, and then around it was kind of mixed up, and then of course behind the seats you've always got a contingent of each team behind the seats, including Prince William, who was there.
I did see that, yeah.
Yeah, so a good 22,000, I think, or 24,000 maybe, at the game. So nice and loud. Understandably, the Dutch are that bit louder, but England had the drums going. I'll be honest with you, Chloe, I had to put in headphones and listen to a podcast because I was so stressed. I nearly didn't want to watch the match. I was like, I
hope it was our podcast.
I don't listen to myself back. Are you crazy? Last thing I want in there is to have my own voice in my own head. That's already stressing me out. But no, it was good. It was, great atmosphere. And I think and this is the thing, it was a bit like that the French match in the first kind of 15 minutes. You were like, ooh, England are up for this. So I was a bit just get a bloody goal first, okay? That's definitely onside and definitely counts. Which obviously LJ got, and we can get into the beauty of that goal. But yeah, it was a good game, really fun game. My only criticism of England is they could have scored more, which is crazy.
Definitely. And I think that's such a good problem or a good criticism to have. I mean, it's one that I would have wished for yesterday. So, I mean, England, let's get stuck into the game because it was, like you said, Ray, just so much more direct. Obviously, LJ getting that goal in the 22nd minute really settled people's nerves. I think the first 15 or 20... Yeah, people thought, I think, that it was almost like an exact replica of the France game. So even though they were playing well, there was still this kind of guardedness, I think, from everyone watching the game that they didn't want to see the same thing happen.
Well, you had the James miss. You had the Russo miss. You were like, oh my God, not again.
It just felt like it felt like deja vu. It was like Groundhog Day of football. And then obviously James breaks the deadline, and it just felt like this moment of elation. And the goal itself was just such a moment of beauty. Getting the ball out wide to Lauren James and Hem, and then pressing Netherlands sort of so aggressively. But I mean, Rach, talk to me about that Lauren James goal when
Let
that
me
first
talk you
went
through
in
this goal.
and the Go on,
Yeah,
just
because
talk as slowly as possible because I want to relive it.
this was a thing of beauty, and this is the perfect definition of Route 1 football. And it's the perfect example of the attributes that Hannah Hampton provides this team. The ball out from her fizzed across nearly the surface. It wasn't a very high ball. It was probably less than head height. Fizzed through the pitch, cut out, I'd say, 10 of the Dutch players nearly, it seemed.
Inch perfect.
To land at Russo's feet as she was breaking through into the Dutch half, actually into the Dutch kind of 30 yards. She picked up the ball, sent in a perfect ball into LJ, who took a touch, shifted, and I think for me, as soon as she picked up the ball, I just thought, it's gone to the right person at the right time. And I think sometimes that's happened to England, where they get the ball in the right place to potentially the wrong person in the moment. It was the right person at the right time with the right confidence. She shifted right and she put the ball in the back of the net the way LJ knows how, which is completely out of reach of any bloody goal. You could have put 3 goalkeepers in there. I don't think they'd have stopped that. So it was a peach of a goal from LJ. Loved the celebration, which unfortunately was the wrong side of me, but we'll get on to that. It was a perfect start. And I think actually the nature of the goal lifted England. It wasn't kind of a ball that kind of like bobbled in or was kind of a ping pong in the box, or it was a dominant goal from back to front that just like cut out the Dutch team like in a hot knife through butter. It just kind of, and I think that showed England, oh yeah, we've got this.
It was definitely a consistent theme as well throughout the game. Hannah Hampton's distribution was one of those things that was really highlighted as being super important in how effective England were. And I think I also have to give credit to Hannah for that particular pass. Like, that was on the outside of her boot. It was one of those floated driven passes. It was inch perfect. And I think goalkeepers, I don't think, get enough credit. Obviously the shot stopping and the saves and, being in the right position and marshalling your defence 100%. But the distribution element that you see from younger keepers now starting to come in, they have the same level of accuracy and precision that the outfield players do now, and like that becomes an attacking arm essentially of the front line. So I think to see that in action, and that wasn't the only time either. I mean, there were multiple balls that Hannah Hampton was playing out, particularly to LJ. I felt like she kept on finding LJ. There was a lovely pass that she played that hit Lauren James's chest just on the sidelines. I think it was just before LJ actually suffered that little bruise to her eye, which came up like such a shiner in the post match conferences. But yeah, I thought that goal in particular, I think the way that it was created, the fact that it was LJ, I think the only person who didn't celebrate was LJ.
Well,
she was
she
so
came
cool
and just did
calm
it,
and composed.
It was almost like
it was just like
a Superman stand where she just kind of stood like, yeah, I did that.
It's what I do. And I think we were lucky enough to speak to LJ just before the competition started. And she was saying like one of the big things for her is that she wants to make a mark in this tournament, and she wants to do it because she wants to be the player that everyone talks about in tournaments. She wants to be the person that, people turn up, they talk about, they want to go and see. And she delighted the crowd yesterday. I mean, talk to me about that second goal as well. I know we're going to get onto the Stanway goal as well, but the second goal for her was also...
Yeah, well, actually, the second goal she celebrated, and she was right in front of me. Because as we've spoken about, I've told you how it kind of works, where you pick your seat at the match, and you get a little number in your bib, and that's where you sit for the game, unless you can find someone to switch sides at you. And I don't really know any Dutch photographers. It wasn't entirely full in terms of photographers, but I did have a guy come to see if there was a seat free, and there happened to be, the girl next to me had moved, happened to be a seat free, and I said, oh, is there many down there? And he goes, well, you can have my seat. So we switched numbers, and I haven't been able to do a team's shooting end both halves, right? It doesn't matter if it's a team I'm not following, I'm happily to do both sides, but I did England's shooting side both times. I am so glad I moved, because I got both LJ and Ella Toon scoring right in front of me, and LJ did do a celebration this time, did do the heart celebration, and so that was really cool to see. But just to quickly touch on, there was this whole discussion last time out about whether LJ should have started. I saw some people on socials trying to say that she'd been criticised during the France game, and I didn't actually see a lot of criticism of LJ.
I didn't either.
I think a lot of the talk was about how she'd been super creative, but whether it would have been more impactful to have brought her on rather than to have started her, right? And that kind of thing you don't know until the game starts. You don't know whether that was the right gamble or not, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. So actually, I think LJ was absolutely fine during that France game. It was just that the game and the midfield needed a bit more robustness. And that's what Serena Wiegman addressed by bringing in Toon. Put Toon in the 10, provided that little bit more defensive quality, a little bit more robustness in that role. But we didn't lose the creativity of LJ because she was pushed right, and it allowed her to both be on the wing but also cut inside and do what she does best, which is what we saw for the goal. So that was a great change, that small tweak of having her still in the game, still being able to do what she does, and then still addressing the issue that there was in the midfield for the France game. And then, of course, having Greenwood out to the left instead of Carter, another great idea. So again, one change in the team, but just some small tweaks, which I think really made a difference. But yeah, the second goal from her, it was a goal Tooney absolutely should have scored, and I think shows the intuition that LJ has when she is in front of goal, is that it's less about just getting it at the goal and more about placing it in the perfect spot. And you saw that, because for Tooney, maybe under a little bit of pressure, it was just about get the ball, get a shot off and get it towards goal. For LJ, it was like, where am I going to put this so the keeper can't reach it? And that's exactly what she did.
No, 100%. And I think there was so much discussion, I think, previously and before, obviously, the competition started. And we were part of that discussion about whether LJ would start or whether Ella Toon would start. And then having them both in this game. And like you said, it kind of did bring out those different qualities to them. And even LJ, even though she sort of pushed higher, was still absolutely incredible in her defensive duties. Like, she didn't lose that element to the play either. So, and then for Ella Toon, I suppose, to get that goal, you could see how much it meant to her. That was such a, she did the point to the sky, obviously in memory of her dad, who passed away fairly recently. And you could just see how much it meant to her and also the squad. And yeah, what was that like to kind of see that? Because I think the crowd really rallied behind her in that moment.
I think, obviously, a very special celebration. I also think for her, she felt she should have had a goal. She'd had a couple of opportunities and she was probably a bit like, bloody hell, like, how many more
what
times
am I gonna do?
Yeah. So she got that goal, and it was one of those ones where she saw it was going in, but she was falling over. Do you know that kind of way? So the celebration almost happened in slow motion. She ended up on her chest. She did a bit of a almost like she was flying on the ground, and then Russo. It was a real example of Russo's play and intelligence and teamwork and willingness to play off the ball and not go for it herself. A really unselfish choice there. But yeah, I thought lovely. Russo set her up, helped her up as well. She did that celebration up to the sky, and you could just see all the teammates standing on the touchline waiting for her, because they knew how important that was. She knew how important it was. So as soon as she finished that heart up to the sky, or that kiss up to the sky, she went straight for the subs bench, and yeah, everyone was absolutely delighted for her. So that was a lovely moment to see.
No, it was absolutely gorgeous. And yeah, massive shout out to Ella, because I can't imagine what that must have meant to her and the family. And I think we've got to talk about the midfield maestros. I mean, Georgia Stanway. Since her debut in November 2018, only Ellen White and Beth Mead have scored more England goals than her. So now she's joined on 23 with Alessia Russo. But Rach, do you think this was her I felt like in the first France game, she was kind of not able to get into possession much. I don't think she was on the ball too much. I think she felt frustrated.
She had a poor game.
In this game, yeah, and it wasn't the best game for her, but I don't think she had the kind of access that I would have liked to see her have. But this game, it felt like she had that kind of freedom and a little bit more flexibility and that creativity. And I kind of saw her come into her own. And it was interesting to kind of hear her before this match kind of say, I don't really want to be in this press conference. All I want to do is really focus on the game in hand. We've put it to bed. Like a bad hangover. I think she said someone texted her.
No, she said a friend messaged her.
It was a bad night, or forget it like it was a bad night you don't want to remember. And then to kind of have to go from that mentality into this game, it kind of felt like a big shift for her. But yeah, was she as impressive as for you as I found her?
Yeah, I think, and we said it as well. It was hard to kind of overanalyze that game when a lot of it was just down to players having bad days, that kind of way. So that I can understand her. Like, I imagine when you're a player and you have a bad game, you just want to get out on the pitch again and have a good game and get rid of that out of your system. I think it was important for her in her position to have a game like she did after the France game, to know that that's not her level, and that, the way she played against the Netherlands is definitely her level. I think the way her and Kira Walsh kind of teamed up a little bit and a bit of a double pivot, I guess, made it difficult for the Dutch to know who to kind of shepherd, and to in order to kind of break up that midfield. It was difficult to do when the two of them were team working that way on the pitch, which I think worked really well. Great to see her goal. Like, I think the thing with Stanway now is that she has that willingness to shoot from distance, and when a ball breaks down as they go into the box and maybe the header doesn't come off or the pass doesn't come off, and a defender kind of just pops it out and just clears it, and Stanway's there, you can be pretty confident that she's going to at least have a shot, and she's got some boot on her as well. Now, this one was kind of fizzed low. might have had a slight deflection, but fizzed low into the corner, so very difficult for Van Domselaar to get. But that was the goal as well, the timing of that goal just before half time. I did message Sophie and I kind of said, I think England need another one before half time just to let them feel a little bit more comfortable going in at the half time. And, because the Dutch are going to go in, analyse, look at where things are going wrong and where they can exploit. So getting that second goal when they did, I think, was key. So, delighted she was able to get that and maybe shake off that France performance a little bit.
Definitely. And now we've covered the midfield, let's give a bit of a shout out and a bit of love to the defenders and the goalkeepers, because it feels like this is what we needed. We needed the clean sheet. Hannah Hampton was a bit of a star of the show, getting pretty much what I'd call an assist, essentially.
An assist to
Not
an
really
assist.
that much. Yes, not really that much for her to do, I'd say, in the game. I don't think she was tested to the absolute max of her abilities, but at the same time, she did all the basics perfectly. So there were so many lofted balls that were coming in. She was sweeping up at the back.
Yeah.
She was commanding. She she kind of owned her area. She was coming out and claiming the balls. And I think sometimes it goes under the radar just how difficult it is to claim when you've got players who are tall and have a decent stature about them, to come through that sea of bodies to come and claim that ball. The flight of the ball is really difficult to judge sometimes.
You had
and
half sun coming from the shade
yeah,
in that
100%. All these factors come into play, and she was relentlessly doing that over and over again. And I don't think there was a fumble at all at any point. So I think for me, I'm 100%. I've got to give credit to Hannah Hampton. I think the defence themselves, I think they were doubling up. I think they were watching their markers. I think they were watching the runs in behind.
They marshalled Miedema so well.
100,
definitely. They did not let her get a touch.
And I also think there was an element of the defence adapting to the Netherlands game plan. So in that first 15 or 20 minutes, I think it was flagged that Jess Carter looked like she was kind of sitting in that sort of left back position. And then she came more into that central position, and Alex Greenwood then sort of stepped
I think
into
they started with Alex on the left.
Oh, it kind of felt like, well, for the TV angle, I think it felt like Jess Carter was like drifting over into the left, so it kind of felt like she was being
maybe she was just like, this is
way.
where I was last time. Oh no, wait.
Oh, that's how it felt, like watching the game unfold. And I think the Dutch were kind of almost relying.
They were targeting her. That was their goal, which was a bit naive, I think, to think they're probably going to be shit there again. So let's just target that. And I kind of felt like they put all their eggs in the Jess Carter basket.
100%. So I think the first 15 or 20 minutes, all you saw was lofted balls in behind Jess Carter. And to be fair to them, they were getting a little bit of success initially. And then I think that's when Jess Carter, Alex Greenwood started doubling up and neutralised the threat completely. And then after that, it didn't feel like the Dutch really had that much of a commanding, or they weren't that aggressive going forwards anymore. I mean, Rach, is that what you saw?
Yeah, I just want to very quickly touch on what you said about the defence. I also think there was some very good long balls over the top from Williamson, from Greenwood, from Carter, finding players up front, providing those options. Like, they were just cutting out the Dutch every time. And they had so much time on the ball to pick out those passes because the Dutch were kind of half pressing, which I just find so ineffective. So yeah, it meant then that, let's talk about the Dutch. The tactics were very unusual. They were very narrow on the pitch. It afforded Lauren Hemp acres of space on the left. It allowed LJ space on the right as well, which, like, two Laurens you do not want to be giving space to. And it just felt like there was a lack of urgency. They were really sitting off England, and not kind of reacting to the fact that there's another long ball into Hemp, there's another ball into LJ, they're getting in again. Like, it's just very slow to react. I think for them, with Miedema being kind of marked out of the game and marshalled out of the game, they didn't really have a plan B. Some unusual substitutions at half time. Like, I think Berman got injured, so Sheda de Spitze came on in place of her, which I think was slightly unusual. I appreciate it was an injury, but I just wouldn't have expected her in that position. Daniela van der Donk didn't come on until the 66th minute, which really surprised me. I would have expected us to start, if not come in at halftime. She came out afterwards and said she was fully fit. Yonkers said, oh, there's a bit of communication. We always knew she could only do 20-25 minutes. So I thought that was quite telling, that she was frustrated not to have started that match. She was very frustrated on the pitch. You could see players slapping the ground, and it's a bit like when England were playing and nothing was going right. I just think the Dutch had one of those games where the game plan was wrong. They didn't adapt it, and they just couldn't get it right. And you could see as the game went on and more and more goals went in, they were just getting so much more frustrated.
I think one person I definitely saw frustration from was Van Domselaar. I think every time a goal went in, she was kind of looking at her defence in this exasperated way. Like, why are you not picking up these players? Like, why is Lauren James? Why have Ella Toon got so much space in and around the area? We know these are dangerous players, and why are you giving them an acre? And you could just see her getting more and more frustrated with what was happening. I mean, she didn't have a bad game, but there was literally nothing she could do about any of the goals that went in. But I think we saw the same thing from Hannah Hampton a few days ago, and I think it was really interesting, I think, to see some of the sort of the post-match conferences. Obviously, Viv not too happy, but it was kind of the questions that were being asked were around, her relationship with Beth Mead and kind of them both
like,
having to
fuck,
console each other in those
get
moments.
over it,
And
like, Jesus.
it's just everyone loves a female player opposition love story.
It was the same with Magda and Pernilla, and Magda didn't even play the feckin' game, and the same thing happened with Viv and Beth, and Beth didn't even start, and they didn't even step on the pitch at the same time. Like, so how that then ends up being a post-match conversation topic when they weren't even on the pitch at the same time? Like, come on.
I think it's just the mainstream media, and I think obviously we've gone from like the football mainstream media then having to translate into women's football, and the interesting thing I suppose about women's football is that you do have these LGBTQ plus opposition stories. So I think naturally, like, everyone's conversation just goes that, like, how do you deal with that dynamic at home? Who's frosty with each other? Who gives
They're
each other a
not at
cuddle?
home. Like, they haven't
people
seen
wa-
each other for
I
the
know,
fucking month.
but equally, I think it was it was, I suppose, an even more interesting conversation because it kept flicking to the bench
Yes,
every
the
now and
camera
again. And
person was
you could
obviously
see,
told.
have a look at Beth Mead, because Beth Mead
Uh,
obviously didn't look too happy having not started the game. Obviously she did then come on, but I did sense there was a little bit of frustration. She didn't look as sort of jovial as you expect, but obviously, like, you're in a Euros tournament, like, if you're not getting on, you're going to be disappointed. Like, you want to see that disappointment because you're hungry to get on the pitch. So yeah, I think
Although she
but
did
it
come
was
on
just
and
one of
start
those
on the
interesting.
left, which I don't think she appreciated.
Yeah, I think you could sense, like,
She
after the
switched
game that
then,
she
but I
wasn't.
think she was a bit like, I finally get on and you put me on the left, but then switched, I think, with Chloe Kelly. So at least she got on the right side, literally.
Definitely, but I think I mean, she obviously did came on. She was a big contributor, and I think Rachel Brown Phillips on comms couldn't have said it any better, that despite her not starting the game, she's been a massive contribution to everything the Lionesses have done to get to this point, and also the first game, and also being on this game, and just everything that she's done for English football. So, like, let's not take away from the fact that she's spent 45 minutes on a bench. Like, who cares? Obviously, Rachel touched on there the sort of the lapses, I suppose, in the Dutch side. I mean, before this game, the Dutch had never conceded more than 2 goals in a single match at a major tournament. Obviously, we're in the situation now where we've got 2 teams on 3 points. We've got the Netherlands and obviously England on 3, having secured one win apiece. France, and we're going to touch on this game in a second because it's such an exciting game in itself and we need to unpack it. But France now on 6 points and obviously going through. But what do we think actually is what are your thoughts on what's going to happen with this last game? Because everything comes down to day 3, and it could have been we'll talk about the next game, but, like, obviously it could have been such an interesting situation where we could have had 3 teams essentially on 3 points apiece. I mean, it's become
Gets
quite
so
a
confusing
close
then.
group of death. Yeah, I mean, how are you
Um,
feeling going into this last group? Where are the nerves at?
I'm not surprised that 3 teams could still get through in this group.
Mhm.
Like, I think that's what we expected. I don't think we expected to have 2 teams through and 2 teams out by the second game in this group. It's a completely different challenge. I think France was a different challenge. The Dutch provided a different challenge. The Wales are going to provide an entirely different challenge. And I think we've seen England in the past struggle to break down teams. Wales are absolutely going to cause those kind of problems, I think. And there is, of course, the extra element of it being a home nation and the opportunity to kind of upset the apple cart a little bit. I mean, I think Wales have to win by like 4 goals and hope that the Dutch win. That the Netherlands. Oh, hang on, I have this down somewhere, but it's very complicated. But basically, like, hang on, I have it here. Bear with, guys. Bear with. Group D. Where are we? At a glance, who needs what? This is what I was trying to figure out last night, and I tell you what, I was so tired that when I was recording mine that I was just like, I don't know, guys. I'll figure it out tomorrow. They would need to beat England by at least 4 goals because of their unfavourable head-to-head goal difference in matches involving themselves and the defending champions, the Netherlands.
Oh, Christ, no, you've lost me. You've lost me in the first sentence. I'm sorry.
Basically,
I'm
look,
gone.
it's bloody hard, and I think if Wales are going out there to say, right, we got to get 4 goals to be in with any hope of getting through, I think it leaves them open at the back, and it leaves England with the opportunity to score goals. Equally, though, if they bank up, this is the thing, right? If they bank up, very difficult for them to go and get 4 goals, but equally difficult for England to score. And if England win, they're through. There's no kind of how many goals. It's if England win, they're through. So, yeah, I think it's a different challenge for them to have to think about. I think they cannot underestimate Wales. They can't think we played really well against the Dutch. That's naturally going to happen when we go out against Wales. Like, there still needs to be the same level of analysis and focus as there was after the France game, and the same level of G'ing up and kind of, determination going into the Wales game as there was going into the Netherlands.
God, the state, all I keep thinking about is the state of the podcast on Monday morning, like what that is going to look like and how tense Sunday night is going to be. Like, Sunday should be a time for winding down, not a time for the most heightened anxiety, fear and concern and nervousness on the planet. But we are obviously going to do a pod in between then, so we'll definitely discuss the lead up to the game in a little bit more detail. All right, Rach, what a tasty little fixture this turned out to be. 8 o'clock last night, France winning 4-1 against Wales. Obviously upsetting news. Wales are all out of their debut tournament after a tough night at St Gallen. They need a 5-goal victory over England on Sunday and for France to beat the Netherlands. So not completely out, but pretty much a foot and a half out the door. But let's talk about the first half, Rach, because this was so spicy. This was so kind of not unexpected, because that kind of feels disrespectful to the Wales team. They have a lot of talent on their squad, but my God, it really shook everyone. Like, oh my God, this could be the biggest upset of the tournament. I think when Matteo, scored in the 8th minute, people were starting to think, okay, well, this is just the floodgates opening. It's just going to go the same again. But actually, Wales said, no. 5 minutes later, Fishlock stepping up, catching France on the counter and scoring that goal. And obviously it was a bit bouncy. It was a bit...
Oh,
it was
a terrible goal, but they all count.
Yeah, 100%. Like, it was a bit messy, but at the same time, like, it really galvanised Wales, and the whole half then became a kind of real matchup about, it became almost like very end to end. It felt like the last 10 minutes of a game condensed into the first half. I mean, Rach, what did you think of that first half?
Well, I don't think it is disrespectful to say that we thought, especially after what we saw in terms of Wales
against
versus the Netherlands and how France played against England, I think it was completely natural to expect France to run away with it, which they kind of did in the end. But in the first half, I mean, France made 7 substitutions, right? First of all, which is an interesting tactic in the second game of a tournament. Part of me thinks, did they perhaps underestimate Wales a little bit? And the thing is, right, you're still playing Mallard, you're still playing Diani, you're playing Majri. It's not like you're playing lesser players. Do you know what I mean? It's still absolute quality. But
it's a stacked bench, yeah.
It's disruptive, right? If you're making 7 changes, that's quite a lot. Equally, Wales changed their goalkeeper and changed their formation. They play in the back 4. So, like, they were brave going into this. So, yeah, I think perhaps there was a slight element of underestimating. I think the speed at which Wales got their goal back, and of course, it was going to be Jess Fishlock, because who else would it be, to score their first goal. I'm really glad it was her, that not only did she get her moment at a major tournament and actually get to a major tournament, but she scored their first bloody goal. So absolutely going down in the history books. And bloody hell, what a sloppy goal it was, but who cares?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Elbow, doesn't matter.
Yeah,
well,
doesn't
elbows
matter.
maybe.
Well, maybe not elbow. VAR definitely would have picked that one up. But no, I think it gave them such a boost. And I think the first half was a bit like the first half against the Dutch, where they were like, yeah, we can cause problems. We're in this. We can kind of shake them up a bit. I think the goal shook France a little bit. And I just, again, the second goal that France scored, just like the Dutch goal, moments before halftime. And an absolute killer time to concede. And we've touched on this with, teams in the WSL that might be lower down the league, and that perhaps naivety at times of when to bank up, when to shore up, what moments in the game do you really need to focus, and those moments of right before halftime, right after halftime, or right before full time. And I think, yeah, that to give away the penalty at that time was a kicker, because again, your halftime talk is changing now, your focus is changing, you're not going in level with bloody France, you're now behind. So yeah, I think the timing of the goal just exemplified the exact same thing kind of that happened in the Dutch game.
Yeah, do you know what? It was a real shame because I felt like Wales actually progressed, like they grew into the game even more, sort of buoyed by the confidence of that first goal, and to keep it level, 1-1 for the best part of 40 minutes or so. It was such an impressive display. I mean, I was on the train back from Leicester at the time, so I was listening to it on the radio, and I've not listened to a radio game in quite a long
I
time. And then I
have a
was looking
couple
at
of
the
times
highlights.
at this tournament. It's nice.
Honestly, like it kind of like it puts you in the moment because you have to like listen to the experience rather than like seeing it. So like when they go quiet or like obviously, and then the penalty, and like they give you every single bit of detail. So it's kind of like, okay, Diani places the ball on the
Shit
spot.
penalty.
She
Shit penalty.
is
Bloody
jumping
hell.
up and down. She is looking into the crowd. Her eyes are darting across. They're pinpoint, and like honestly, you feel like you're in Diani's shit. Like it was the weirdest experience, but it was amazing. I think I like, actually might do some of these games and radio again. But at the same time, Wales completely unstuck by individual errors. I mean, that penalty, conceding that, it was such a
Blatant, yeah.
sloppy thing to do. It could have changed the game going into that into the dressing room at half time, knowing that you're 1-1 against a side that everyone was expecting to kind of tear you apart a little bit, and then having that confidence to kind of reset and go again in the second half. It kind of felt like it shouldn't have been an nail in the coffin. It was only 2-1 at that point, but it just felt like the
The
door was
timing.
starting to close.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
the timing of it that kind of started to put it to bed. And I think it was so not disheartening, but it was so kind of like heartbreaking, I think, to see Safia Middleton Patent, who I absolutely love. She's been such a great advocate for, like all the lovely stuff that she does off the pitch. Then kind of just about get like a
Oh,
toenail,
it's a
dive
dreadful
to the
penalty,
right
wasn't
hand
it?
side. Yeah, it was such a soft penalty, and had she kind of stayed put and kind of maybe like, I don't know, you risk it as a goalkeeper, I suppose, staying
Yeah.
put, but she just about got a toe to it, and it kind of dribbled in, and it just felt they didn't deserve that. I
What I
mean,
thought
they
was really funny was that penalty did not deserve the goal celebration it got. If I'd
no.
scored that penalty, I'd have been like, Jesus Christ, thank God, right guys, move on, let's get another one. Rather than like, yeah, I'm doing my celebration or whatever. I don't know what she did, but like they all lined up and did something, and I was like, that was fucking lucky there. Like that just about got over the line.
I think, I mean, but looking at sort of how well Wales did, I know things kind of fell apart a little bit in the second half, and obviously it did become a little bit more one-way traffic, which is what we expected in the first half. But do we now think there's more of a risk that Wales pose going into the last group stage game? Because obviously they do have something to play for. They have 5 goals to play for if they have any chance of staying in the competition, and they want to do themselves justice. It could be their last game in the Euros for a number of, or well, everyone's for a number of years, but they're never guaranteed, I suppose, qualification. So do you think for Wales actually there's, I don't know, does it fill you with a little bit more dread going into that last group stage game, which should have effectively been on paper, I suppose, England's easiest game to play?
I don't think it would have mattered what happened with Wales against France and the Netherlands before the England game. I don't think it would have mattered
Okay.
whether they would have had skin in the game, whether they wouldn't have skin in the game. Wales are always going to turn up for the England game. That's the way I think,
Mhm.
anyway. So I don't think anything would have made it more or less or extra. It was always going to be a big one, and Wales were always going to be wanting to get the absolute most out of a game against England. I don't think it needed anything extra or anything was going to make them more G'd up for it, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean the fact that there is still a potential, yes, it makes it dangerous for England, of course, and England know they absolutely need to win it. I just think the need for so many goals versus the best setup against England for Wales is to defend resolutely. They're two very different things to be able to do for a team that, as we've said, struggles to score a lot of goals. So it's a big task, but they will very happily upset the party for England, no question.
100%. And I think it is going to be that clash of the home nations that's going to be so special to see on Sunday. I think maybe, yes, there's going to be an element of, England having seen, I suppose, how many goals, I suppose, Wales have conceded in the past 2 games, and knowing that that's a bit of an area of weakness for them. And then also knowing that Wales do have that, particular threat in kind of catching people on the counter and having those quick attacking moments. So, yeah, I think there's probably something there that the Lionesses can learn from it. But my God, it's going to be such a matchup for the ages.
They'll want to avoid what happened in previous Euros where England
Mhm.
faced home nations, where they beat Northern Ireland 5-0. They beat Scotland, what, like 6-0, 6-1 in 2017? They'll want to definitely avoid that.
Definitely, 100%. And we're hoping it's, we're still hoping for a tasty game. I mean, I want to win, but I still want it to be done in a tasty fashion. I think the thing that made the Wales game so impressive is obviously they came off the back of their bus being involved in a crash on its way to a training session on Wednesday. The FAW said all players and staff on the bus were uninjured, but an ambulance did attend to the driver of another vehicle who was taken to hospital. The initial session was cancelled, but they trained later that day back at
Listen,
their team base.
I've driven around here. It's, pretty
Treacherous.
hairy with the trams and the bike lanes, and they have pedestrian crossings with they have zebra crossings. Some of them are pedestrianised with lights, some of them aren't. So you really need to be on your game about when you do and don't have to stop at pedestrian lights. You're sometimes driving on the tram tracks, you're sometimes driving next to the trams. You can turn right when the light's red. It's just, there's a lot, okay? So, I'm glad everyone's okay, but, it is quite hairy, I imagine, driving a massive big bus around these roads.
It sounds like wacky races essentially. But yeah, glad to hear that everyone's okay, and thoughts to the person who was also taken to hospital. Okay, tonight, Rach, the schedule, the fixtures, they're relentless, they're ongoing. We've got Finland, Switzerland and Norway, Iceland tonight. It's a straight shootout between Finland and Switzerland to qualify second behind Norway. Iceland are already out. Obviously, I think there's going to be a massive Switzerland contingent at this game. They want the host to go through. We all kind of want the host to go through in a way, but Finland have been providing some pretty tasty moments in this tournament. I mean, Rach, if I had to put your flagpole in the sand...
Oh my God, this is so hard to call because both teams have had really impressive performances in this tournament. And I'd like to see Switzerland get through. There's been some beautiful scenes of the Swiss fans marching to games. There's been some unbelievable drone shots of these picturesque towns, these lovely old buildings and bridges, and this sea of red crossing them. It's been incredible. So I would really like for that to continue in the tournament. I have been very impressed with Finland, of course. I really didn't think they were going to get out of the group or have a chance of getting out of the group, given they haven't won a group game in 16 years or 4 Euros. So, they've been super impressive and a young squad that are really starting to do the business. But I'm hoping for a Swiss win.
Me too. It's going to be so nervy, and I think obviously when you've got the fan base behind it and the country starts to get behind it, it just means so much more. But we will wait and see. Obviously we'll be back on Saturday, but before that, Rach, I think you had a few special words that you wanted to say to end off the pod.
I did. I'd quite like to dedicate this pod to Sue Klesniks, who very sadly passed away on Friday. A massive Lionesses supporter, a massive women's football supporter, not just of the players on the pitch, but such a massive advocate for everyone working in the game, supporting everything, you and I do at Upfront. She was one of our most ardent listeners and commenters and engaged listeners. She's a huge supporter of Girls in the Ball. Read everything that came out around women's football, watched everything around it, always engaged with stuff and gave her insights. A real intelligent fan, and I used to have many an intense conversation pre and post match with Sue. She always loved delving into the detail and talking about what was needed and who needed what, and one of those fans that could put club bias aside as well, which I think seems to be getting harder and harder for people to do in the game. But she could very much park her allegiances during England tournaments and travelled the world following the Lionesses. So she very sadly passed away on Friday with a short battle with cancer. She couldn't make it out to the Euros, which she had absolutely planned to do. So she's definitely left a huge hole, not just in the Lionesses fan base, but I think more broadly in women's football.
That's really lovely, Rach, and I completely echo your sentiments there. And send thoughts and love to Sue's family and friends. I think everyone's always affected when someone has been such a huge part of the women's football community and has been one of the OGs in the space as well. Leaves us. So big love, and again, dedicating the podcast to her feels like 100% the right thing to do.